right, so what we have done over the past 3 to 4 years now with the work in the Bester Community of Hope is we've used these trainings as opportunities to create a conversation in the community. We have not been directive with this work. We've really focused on providing the information and hoping that people will naturally arrive at places where they can think about how this fits within their organization. So in 2016, in the early part of 2016, we brought Dr. Anda's counterpart, Vincent Filiti, and we did a large event at Bester Elementary. This venue's a little better, don't you think? It's a little better? We love your school, Principal English, but I think the venue's a little bit more conducive. And then after the event there, we focused really on making sure we laid out the research and people understood it. We had some folks from the Child Trauma Academy also really provide information, but it was some pretty heavy-duty stuff, it was like a 5-hour science class we had. And so in the fall of that year, we hosted Antietam Academy, Bester Elementary, folks from social services and the faith community, and we had a screening of a film, Paper Tigers, and we talked about when this research is implemented in a school, this is what it looks like. So people could start to make the connection between all of this information and what it looks like when it's implemented in a community. This past March, in this venue here, we had a lot of people show up to meet James Redford, who is the director of the film Resilience. He also directed Paper Tigers. He talked about his experience in a school in the state of Washington. That's what Dr. Anda was talking about for those 10 years that he was over there. And the work and how they were able to, over time, create a trauma-informed school system, specifically at Lincoln Alternative School. And so people came away from that training understanding deeper about ACEs and how different approaches to serving children and families that are either affected by trauma or living in a community that is impacted by trauma, and then it posed more questions. So what we want to do today is move from theory and practices that are happening elsewhere to practices that are happening in our state, in our county, and our neighborhoods here. And so we're really super excited that these awesome folks have agreed to join us today to talk about their work that they're doing at the neighborhood, county, and state level. So if we could just briefly go down the line, starting with Brother Andy, explain your name and what brings you to the work, where you're from.
Good morning, or good afternoon, whatever part of the day we're in. My name is Brother Andy Smith. I'm a part of Brothers United Who Dare to Care. We go by Brothers Who Care. And over the years, we have been trying to be a conduit for information, self-help information, and news that can help serve our community. And that's pretty much what I do besides teach pre-K.
Good morning, everybody.
You're good.
I'll share.
I'm good. My good friend, Brother Andy here, he's helping out. Thank you very much. I'm Victor Brito. I'm the Chief of Police in the city of Hagerstown.
Maybe your mic doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. There you go. Don't expect me to sing, please. Good policing is about partnerships. Police themselves cannot do everything that we need to have done in our communities. And I can say right now to my right, Brother Andy, not only is he a friend, but he's an incredible partner. To my left, Delegate Wilson is equally engaged in the community. He's everywhere. He's a great partner in our community, a great partner with the police department in everything that we do. But good, solid policing involves, as the video said, a village, everybody involved in getting things done. Tim Morrow, principal of Antietam Academy, an incredible partner for us in some of the things we do in our community to help people and to extend that conversation and communication that we have. So I'm proud to be here. Thank you very, very much. And I recognize quite a few people in the audience, but thank you.
As the chief said, my name is Brett Wilson. I'm a state delegate for the last 3 years. I've represented Hagerstown in General Assembly down in Annapolis. And really the path that led me here really started when I joined the state's attorney's office here in Washington County back in 2002. Without going into too much detail, the experience I had working with the Narcotics Task Force, being hands-on involved in the community, going to the homes that were blighted by drug addiction, seeing the abuses of children, the abuses of adults, the abuses of system, really started me on the conscious trip to get more involved in the community as we went along, which at some point, and as you've all experienced in life, there comes a time when you just decide it's time to do X or do Y. And a few years ago, my family and I decided it was time to run for office and try to really make a difference. And I'm sure we'll get into more of what we've been doing in Annapolis to try and make the world better for a lot of these kids that are stuck in a cycle of abuse, cycle of addiction, cycle of trauma. And I'll be glad to talk about that, but that's essentially why I'm here today.
Good morning. I'm Rebecca Jones-Gaston, and I'm Executive Director with Social Services Administration at the Department of Human Services, and have the great pleasure of working directly with Mike Piercy and his team at Washington County's Department of Social Services, and am excited to be playing a role in integrating what we're learning through ACEs and trauma-informed practice and integrating that across the state in all of the work that we do. And I had, before landing in the seat that I'm in, spent 10 years at Casey Family Programs, so have some history in understanding how this work has really evolved across the community here. And so I'm excited to play a different role in continuing to advance that effort.
Good morning. I'm Carolyn Holcomb. I'm an 8th grade science teacher at Western Heights Elementary School. I mean, elementary. They just act like that. No, they're middle schools, middle schoolers. And I'm really excited to share what I've learned as an educator over the years, the necessity for all educational arms of the county to become trauma-informed, the imperativeness of all of our teachers to become resiliency trained. And that's the only way I see that we, as an educational branch, can effectively help transform the lives of our students.
Can we just give all these people a huge round of applause? So I'm going to hand this off to Dr. Anda in a second. Just one important point that I wanted to make in relation to the trainings that we've been doing, the conversations that we're about to have. Being trauma-informed does not remove us from having accountability for kids. It does not remove us from having accountability for families that we work with and the communities that we're in. Being trauma-informed means we have greater insight and understanding, and thus have the compassion to work with these groups that we're working with. And then we will be more adaptive and creative in the response that we have, because we know that there can be a better result as a part of that process. Okay? Dr. Anda, off to you.
I'd like to keep this open as possible at the beginning. In terms of what we're here today talking about, the concepts, is there anything that really stands out about how it applies to what you're doing, or the issues that you see that you might think about addressing differently, or try to teach in the system within the system that you work in?
Well, Dr. Anda, I'll break the ice, I guess, on that one. And obviously, everything that you presented this morning is exactly what a legislative body is supposed to be working on, right? It's our job to try and improve the quality of life for every citizen and every resident within our jurisdictions. And the factors that you put up when you're looking at your ACE analysis, obviously, substance abuse. Well, we've been working significantly on substance abuse, all substances, particularly right now, the opioid crisis. As we know, that's the number one most deadliest of the substance abuse issues right now. But when we start discussing these items in Annapolis and we hear the stories from all around the state, what we hear are the similarities in family consequences and the breakdown of the family, usually caused by a substance abuse issue and a physically abusive relationship within the family household. And what we've done just most recently is try to address those through, and I'll just list a couple acts without going into detail, but this past year, the HOPE Act, the Let's Start Talking Act. We did Justice Reinvestment 2 years ago because we recognized that on the tail end, if you're going to break a cycle, you need to address those people that perhaps have caused the trauma and try to help them reintegrate without causing more trauma, and actually with being beneficial to the redevelopment of the folks that were traumatized the first time. We look locally at the Day Reporting Center and JSAP and Tamar. Our county, everyone should be proud, our county on the criminal justice side has been at the forefront of addressing these issues as they've been recognized and taught to us by the professionals doing the research. And when I saw your presentation and I saw you go down the list by percentage, it's like, yeah, I mean, that is what my job is to address, to try and give us a chance to get these kids out of these cycles.
Thank you.
So what I guess, for me, when I first started hearing about the ACEs study and brain science many years ago, I'm a social worker by training. And I was thinking, holy crap, what have I been doing up until now in working with families and kids? And it was an amazing eye-opener in regards to, we've been doing a lot of things, not necessarily wrong, but there's so much opportunity for us to do it better. And our role in social services really is, we're intervening in a capacity because there's something that's happened, be it with a child, be it with a vulnerable adult. And the lens that the ACEs study brings, that trauma-informed practice brings, allows us to come into that engagement at a point of crisis differently, to engage with the parents differently. But also the important piece, I think the thing that's thrilling for me is the opportunity about breaking generational cycles. Because it is terrifying a little bit to know what the impact of those experiences have on generation after generation. And one of our key roles really is kind of working in the now, but also with the eye on what is coming tomorrow and how can we impact better outcomes for the communities that we're serving.
I want to tell you a little story. My first year teaching at Western Heights. If you don't know Western Heights, we're a 70% farm school, Title I. The nickname is Western Fights. And my colleague came to me and she said, man, I had this boy come into my class and he came unprepared and he needed a pencil, so I gave him one of my pencils, and during the course of my lesson, he just starts breaking his pencil. And then he starts throwing his pencil across the room. And I looked at him and I said, what are you doing? That's my pencil. I was nice enough to give it to you when you came to class unprepared. What are you doing? And he looks at her and he says, I just watched my dad beat up my mother for hours. Police came, they arrest my dad. I don't care about your pencil. And she looked at me and she's like, he's right. He shouldn't be caring about his pencil. And this happens all the time. Our children don't articulate the reason behind the symptoms they're exhibiting. And I had an administrator come to me and say, well, if only your lesson plans were more dynamic, you'd capture these kids. Now, I try to be as dynamic as I can be. I make little hydrogen bombs. I light things on fire all the time. But when some girl's been molested by mom's boyfriend all night, she came to school nonetheless because that is the safe place. I don't care how good I am as a teacher. She's in trauma. She has adrenaline and cortisol filling her brain. She literally can't learn. And unless we address that aspect, that these aren't bad kids, these are symptomatic kids. And when they walk into my classroom, now I'm looking for the symptoms. And now when I can see the kid, and we all know someone who's having a bad day. It's written all over. Kids can't conceal anything. Certainly a 14-year-old can't. It's all out there. And so before class starts, if that teacher can go up and say, wow, you look so mad. Is everything okay? And usually the kid will, is there anything I can do? And they really don't want you to do anything. They'll say, no. Okay, do you need to take a break? No. Okay, well look, I'm gonna start class, but hey, I know you're having a bad day. If you want to take 5 minutes and go out in the hall, get some water, you have my permission. You know I'm here, right? Yeah, okay. That was a 30-second conversation that any teacher can have. And what I just did was I just allowed that kid permission to feel the way they do. I offered them an out if they need one. And most importantly, I let them know, you know what, there's someone here that cares. I think as educators, we fear to do that. We fear to get drawn in. I can't solve that kid's problem. The kid doesn't want you to solve their problem. They don't. They just want you to be there. They want to know someone's there and that they're safe. So that's I'll stop. That's something we're trying to do.
Yeah. Anybody else? That one? Yeah, thank you. I'm going to offer this up as a sort of a two-part opening is changes that you see happening in the work that you do that may be related to this topic, and or what are the kind of barriers that you run into? What are the things that are in the way of changes that you'd like to see? So it's really a two-part question. Changes you've made or things that get in the way, what are the obstacles?
Well, in the work that I do in the community and also in the classroom, one of the biggest barriers or obstacles can be ourselves. I don't have the advantage of knowing what presentation you gave here earlier because I just showed up. But I'm here, one, because of what was said, healing communities. Communities do need to be healed. Also, communities need to be connected. And ourselves is one of the biggest barriers I can see is that sometimes the people that we're trying to help didn't choose to be there, and the number one thing that we need to have is respect for their humanity. I don't think anyone would pick to be poor. Most of us know after what happened in 2008, we're all 1 or 2 paychecks away from being homeless. So our situations can change at any time, but our humanity allows us to survive it. And having respect for the people that we're trying to help, like the relationship that I've built with the chief here was, he reached out to me, we sort of made a connection. We set aside our agendas and the work that we wanted to do and got a chance to know each other and respect and care for each other and appreciate our humanity. And that allows us to be able to do what we can to help one another. If I allowed any of my prejudices, my culture, or circumstances going on around me to not give him a chance because he's a police officer, I wouldn't have been able to develop the relationship that we have and enjoy. The children that I try to teach, I will tell you I'm not the best in teaching academics, but I am the best in trying to make sure that that child's learning experience is one that they love, that they know they can learn, that they know that they cared about. I see the students come by, I don't know 80-something of them's names, but I always try to tell the girls, how you doing today, pretty girl? How you doing today, guy? You may be having a bad day, but I want to care about the person, the individual, more than the agenda, what we're trying to achieve. I'm trying to make that connection that maybe they will trust and care enough about what I'm trying to offer to use it at some point. But we can be the biggest barrier. And it can come from even personal hang-ups. I mean, we go out and do home visits in people's homes, and there's times I may not want to sit on a chair that doesn't look like one that I like, but what am I there for? What am I here for? I have to set aside my prejudices, my fears, and actually want to do what it is that I have the opportunity and the chance to do, make a connection, and hopefully make somebody better than they were when I found them.
Thank you. Thank you.
My good friend here, we met about 15 months ago. He's family now. And that started with effective communication. And when you look at barriers that we have, usually all the root cause of a lot of challenges we have are the lack of communication or ineffective communication. When you see a police officer every day, the visual, uniform, a duty belt around their waist, firearm, taser, handcuffs, radio, a variety of different equipment, thousands of dollars around their waist. to protect you and others and the officer. The most important tool a police officer has is his or her mouth, the ability to communicate. If you don't communicate effectively, especially in our role, it's for naught. Effective communication is the lifeblood of good policing. It's very, very important in how we treat people with respect and dignity, and all of our interactions. Every situation is different. Being an effective communicator does not make us soft or weak. It makes us more effective. It makes us stronger in how we do things. And I want to tell you just a brief little story. I was fortunate. I didn't spend most of my career, I spent all my adult life with the Metropolitan Police Department in Washington. I was fortunate to have great mentors as I moved up to the chain of command. The best chief I ever had that I worked directly for was Chief Charles Ramsey. Some of you may know him. A mentor, a father figure to me. I worked directly for him for the last 2 years he was on the job. But he told us a story, which is very important about effective policing. He said, and Chief Ramsey, again, when he came to D.C., he wasn't a D.C. guy. He came from Chicago. He spent 30 years at a command level, the Chicago PD. But he talked to us at command staff meetings, but he told us a story. And the story was this: as a young narcotics sergeant, he had an opportunity to go into a lot of houses on warrants with a lot of his team, his other detectives. Oftentimes, those were fairly violent encounters. You'd go in, he'd say they'd go in with a sledgehammer. But he had one detective that was able to navigate that. And every warrant that they served when they went into a home, he was able to calm everything down. And Ramsey saw that over and over again. So finally one day, he pulled the detective aside and he says, "How do you do that? It's magical." He goes, "It's not magic, Chief." He goes, "Remember one thing. In life, you get 10 points. Take 3 points right off the top of that 10, because no one is born into a perfect situation, rich, poor, and otherwise." He said, "Take another 3 points off that 7, because you're born into a family situation that maybe there's no loving, no nurturing, no mother, no father. There's alcohol abuse, maybe sexual abuse. There's all sorts of dysfunction in that family. That leaves you 4 points. Take 3 more points off that 4, because you're born possibly into a marginalized community that the history of policing has not touched those folks, and it's negative. If you're true to yourself, you understand that the history of policing in this country is not all perfect. And you recognize that. That leaves 1 point. That 1 point is that person's dignity and respect. If you take that away from anybody, they'll fight you every time. So always remember that. And that stuck with me. And that's the way we have to police. Because it doesn't matter what you have. Everyone has dignity and respect. So that's incredibly important. So that's what I want to say.
So one of the charges of being at State Central Office is that we're the ones that develop the policies that our good partners in the local departments are to follow. And so one of the things that we're really trying to do intentionally is take our family-centered, strength-based practice that's been going on successfully across the state and weave intentionally trauma-informed practice into that, and creating a practice model so that when you go to Worcester County or to Washington County or to Harford County, when you're talking about practice and what the values are and how we commit to engaging with the communities that we're serving, it's the same. And then you've got the local nuances and twists and community partnerships, but that's really what we're trying to do at the state level. The state has done a fantastic job of trying to minimize trauma by keeping kids in their homes. So since 2007, we've reduced the number of kids in foster care across the state by 54%. That's fantastic. And we're one of 2 states in the country that have been able to sustain the decline in use of foster care. So that's one really exciting thing that we're committed to continue to do. But what that means is our skills of working with families, with their children in the home, have to be that much better, so that we're able to ensure that kids are safe, first of all, but also that the family is well and able to take care of each other and grow. And you think about adult services. The number one phone call that we get for adult protective services has to do with self-neglect. And I can't help but think that a lot of that shows up on the slides that we saw today of the substance use, the mental health challenges, all those sort of things that kind of combine together to make it really hard to want to take care of yourself or know how to take care of yourself. And so with a practice model that spans across our entire community, being committed to doing those things well and better and continuing to push ourselves to not just get into the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So what if the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, right? Where else are we getting more apples? We have to be able to nurture our communities. And the next thing that I'd share, just in thinking about, I saw a lot of myself in the story of ACEs. And I won't ask folks to raise their hand, but I'm pretty sure that a lot of folks in this room saw a lot of themselves in the conversation around adverse childhood experiences. And so what does that mean for me as a worker? And how I'm going into situations that may be very reminiscent to an experience that I had. And how am I going to, A, not bring that to the table with the people I'm serving, but how am I going to take care of myself? And that secondary trauma, that trauma that we bring with us, a lot of reasons why we get into the work that we do is connected to trauma we've experienced. And so the state has been really committed to investing in taking care of our workforce and figuring out and finding new and different ways for us to be better at what we're doing and taking care of ourselves so that we're better in serving the community. And we're doing it a lot in partnership with our good partners in the legislation.
Sure, and let me just add to that, one of the initiatives that we believe will bear very good fruit is called the 3BI initiative, which is the Three Branches Institute. And basically that brings together judicial, executive, and legislative into a room on a regular basis to try and coordinate responses to community issues. You know, our system is set up on checks and balances, right? We've got the different branches so that one doesn't have too much power in that, and that's all kind of a negative power to keep things in line. But what it doesn't bar, and I don't think we've effectively used it, is that we can also work together on issues to try and make the community better. So the Three Branches Institute initiative is bringing all those branches together in a room with the experiences of people from each of those different endeavors, trying to figure ways that we can actually resolve these issues and provide wraparound services to the family at an early stage without having to go from spot to spot to spot. You know, when you talk about hindrances to development, the two biggest ones, institutional knowledge and institutional siloing. Because knowledge, if we think we know it, guess what? We're not learning what's really going on. And if we live in a silo, we're not cooperating with other agencies, other people that also have a piece of that pie. You know, life is a Venn diagram. It's not a bunch of columns. And sometimes, and it's easy to do over time, and you know, we all have heard jokes about government bureaucracy, but it's true. If you're doing the same thing long enough, quite frankly, that's how you're going to do it tomorrow also. And we don't take the time to really investigate, to learn about what is changing in our communities, and trying to address that instead of addressing it like we would have a year ago, trying to address it now with whatever new techniques we've learned will work. The best practices model is certainly one that we want to put in across the state, but we don't want to put it in a manner of one size fits all. I mean, one size doesn't fit all from household to household, let alone from one county to another. So it's important that we keep that type of flexibility with the professionals that are on the ground. We just give them the tools to do the job better. But they have to make that initial identification, take in that data, and process what's going to be best to break that particular household out of the cycle that it's trapped in. And that's what we're trying to do.
So when I want to know how my students are doing, one of the things I can do is I can give them a test. That's easy. When they want to know how a school is doing or how a county is doing, then we're going to give high-stakes tests. And I understand that we need some rubric to assess our schools. But I'm not a test teacher, and I'm not real thrilled with the level of importance these high-stakes tests have put. And here's the detriment and the barrier to what's happening. So Washington County, if you didn't know, did not do well. We dropped almost across the board on this test. And so the principals get called in, and they get talked to very sternly. And the principals come back to the teachers because, ultimately it's our fault. We get talked to very sternly. And then it's, well, what are you doing wrong in the classroom? What are you going to do to fix this? Now, I am always, every day, looking for a way to become a better teacher. I really am, and all of my colleagues are. And I'm so thrilled to work with the best educational professionals I've ever seen in Washington County. They really are phenomenal. I want us to look a different direction. Like I said, maybe that it's not that we don't know our reading strategies, and it's not that we don't know our pedagogy. Maybe there's something more. And maybe we need to put as much emphasis in this direction. So I know that has worked for me in my classroom. So the first day of school, I'm not doing anything other than trying to get those kids to know about me. And I tell them my job the first day is to get you to buy into me. Because I know if you can't buy into me and why I'm going to ask you to do things a certain way, then I've lost you the whole year. But if I can sell myself to you, then I've got you. And I know that if I can get their buy-in, then I do have them the rest of the year. But my principal walked in as I'm telling these personal stories and capturing their hearts. And there goes an email. Remember, we only have 180 days. You should be jumping right into your curriculum, And so I teach different kids on different days. So even day 2 of school this week, I had brand new kids. So there I am, selling myself in my infomercial. And the superintendent now walks through my class. And I get another email. Remember, it's really critical. We jump right into our curriculum. And I thought, no. It's really critical that they know that this is a safe place to learn, and you can trust me. That's what's critical, not me doing anything. Thank you. So if I had any influence in the educational department, it would be we need a balance. We need a balance because there's a reason why our scores have flat. If that's where you want to do, look at scores. There's a reason why we have flatlined in the best of schools, in the best of neighborhoods. And so maybe it's not the teaching branch we need to improve. Maybe it's addressing everything we learned up there, because that's how we can help their minds heal and get those test scores up if that's what's important to us. So.
Hey, I'd like to jump in because she pointed out something that's very important, that it also helps to remove a barrier. I know in about the 20 years that I've been doing this outreach work for the community, that along the way, and I see familiar faces in this room with people that are out there keeping boots on the ground, doing what we're trying to do to reach people. And we're almost like a tool in the toolbox. So you never know you need it until that particular job comes up that calls for us. And building credibility, even with the 15 months that the chief's been here in our community. When I'm out in the community, I see Brett, I see Tammy sitting over there. I see faces that are always, ground level to what's going on. And I think we honestly want to be there to help, but also to have that credibility. Because I take for granted some of the credibility that I have, but down in the Jonathan Street community where our news publication gave birth, that now actually reaches into 4 states and does a little international work now, I can go up on someone's doorstep any time of the day, even at night, and they'll never question why I'm there. Because at least once a month, myself or one of the people that still deliver a hard copy of our news publication to those homes they get that. They know why we're there. I've seen other groups come out maybe once a year or whatever to do something, and people question, what do they want? And I guess when you get that credibility that nobody is questioning why you're there, that gives you an advantage to be useful for whatever model it is that we're using to be successful in the service that we're providing. And I would say this to you, take that chance to be consistent. I do a thing, I'm wearing some colors up here that some of you may have noticed. One is my tribe, and it's sort of like a Garveyite, red, black, and green, the blood, the people, the land, or the life, the people, the motherland. And the other one is humanity. A couple years ago, I started doing this thing where I give these bracelets away, and it's not Maryland colors, but it's helpful. It's red, yellow, black, and white, and brown, and it represents the human family. And I give the notion that together looks nice. It really does. And also with people. Together, we can do great things together. And I sort of give these bracelets away. I just make them. And my idea is that one day I'll walk in the room and I always see somebody wearing one of them. And for all else that I do, this is one thing that I do, I like, and I keep doing it. I keep doing it. I keep doing it. There's celebrities that wear them now. In the music industry, we do a lot of cultural coverage, and they're wearing them. They get it, and it's just something I consistently do, and it kind of builds credibility that I really believe in everyone coming together and doing something right. So for what you're doing, you built your credibility with me.
Okay, we have about 10 minutes. Why don't we move towards trying to get some interaction here? Either if you have questions for me or for the panel, or if you'd like to share what you might be doing, your experience. We have a microphone.
So who's first, right? That's what it always boils down to. Oh, here we go. Miss Marshall. You have to stand up.
Well, I want to just thank the Western Heights area. In my line of work, rarely does a school call me and say, "Can you come in? We got a concern about your child." And it was one of the newer experiences I had with systems. The silos. We broke down some silos. You invited us in, you invited other people in, and we tried to help one child. And I can tell you, he is succeeding now. He's thriving. So I think what we recognize is trauma happens in relationships, and it can only be healed in a relationship. So I think the schools are awesome.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm a clinical social worker. I work in Montgomery County. I do in school and in-home mental health. I wanted to speak to the educational side of things. My wife is a teacher. 85% of her school is free and reduced lunch. They are Title I. My mother is a teacher. She teaches school community-based, trying to help kids with disabilities integrate in the community. My wife's mother was an administrator, and her aunt was a principal. My father and my brother in Montgomery County work in the planning department, so we are a family of public servants. So we understand the issues you guys deal with. I wanted to say thank you to you, because I know what it's like to be in the side of things where there is very little recognition. And in today's society and culture, things have become very difficult. And I feel like in schools, that is the one place we have to reach children, point blank, period. And there's been a lot of talk about how we treat our educators. And I would like to speak to you on the legislative piece. I plead with you, and I beg with you, that we ease up on teachers, and that we give them the chance to really reach our children, because test scores is not what it's about. It is really about how many kids we reach, and kids are not gonna do well if they aren't fed. They're not thinking, they're not doing algebra, they're hungry.
And just to respond quickly, we actually have. In the last 2 years, each year, we've passed different bills that are slowly creeping back the number of mandated days that have to be spent on testing. It's a big fight. I can tell you the Teachers Association goes one way, we go one way. I mean, there's a lot of different philosophies about the scoring, and I think each is well-intended. But you're right, we have to find the appropriate balance of testing so we can have some accountability, but also giving the classroom freedom so the teachers can not just teach answers, but teach the ability to think. And that's really what we want our kids to be able to do, is take facts, process them, and learn on their own account. So we have done a couple of changes. There's more to be done, but we're getting there.
Yes, and we appreciate what you've done. To the police officers and the task force, thank you. Thank you for taking into account the mental health needs of our students and in our communities. And I just encourage everyone here to keep doing what you're doing. We are making a difference. And everyone keeping all this in mind, we can help these kids. And I'm living testimony to that, so thank you.
I saw 3 hands. I got to go in order. Don't worry, I'm not coming to you. Don't worry.
Hi, I had a question for Dr. Anda. I understand how the ACE study is being used, and the goal is prevention as far as adverse childhood experiences. How's the data, is it being used to study protective factors and resiliency?
Well, we didn't have the foresight to include that when we did the study in the 90s. There are other groups now that are expanding what we've done to ask about not only protective factors and what those might be, but also community-wide factors like some of those that are being brought up today. Exposure to community violence, poverty, hunger, racism, feeling unsafe in your community. I think that's sort of the next level in terms of research that's out in the field now. It's really, we could spend a whole hour talking about what would be really necessary to study that. It gets really complex in terms of measuring resiliency or protective factors, adversity, and all the wide array of pathways that those two might lead. But I can assure you that there are groups that are doing that now, and that you'll be seeing that over the next 5 or 10 years, so we can understand it better.
Oh, there we go.
Hello, my name is Brandon McAllister. I work for Family Services for Frederick City Housing Authority. And something that I heard, a lot of y'all say was the credibility thing. And me coming from, that type of background as a kid like that, seeing that consistency, showing up, taking that 30-second conversation to see how my day is going. Or to take that 30-second conversation to see how that kid is doing. Seeing you show up in the communities over and over and over. That not being there for a month, a year, and then never seeing you again. Once that the data is all done and a little bit got fixed and it got a little bit better, we don't have to go back there anymore. So something that stood out to me was understanding that the book knowledge and all that's great. The college degrees that's excellent. That's excellent. Like the knowledge though, the experience, relating to these children that they know. You know what? I know what you feel like. That I'm not just going to read out of a book and tell you what you suffer from. That I can tell you through experience. I understand how you feel. So having that credibility and consistency is what's going to pay off. Like I know for me and my coworkers, that's what we try to do. Letting them know that you're nothing different than we've been through those things, but this is how we overcome them. So I just ask that throughout y'all travels, continue to understand that experience, that credibility, it goes a long way with kids just like me. Thanks.
I just want to mention, I'm Robin Handler from the public school system, that this is the first week of school, and with our law enforcement agencies, we are trying to implement Handle with Care, where a notice will go to the school system, and then we will share it with teachers to handle a student with care when they have witnessed a traumatic event or been involved in a traumatic event. So this is our first week back to school, and we're hoping to expand Handle with Care.
I want to touch on what you just said. I'm so appreciative of that. I think it's a phenomenal thing, and I know that works with the police department and everything else, and it's critical. I had a young boy in my advisement group last year, and he missed a day of school, and then he came in. He was kind of out of sorts, and I didn't pick up on why. You know, I started being kind of the tough one, pushing him a little. Hey, what do you mean you didn't do your homework? Come on. A week goes by, and then I find out accidentally that he had come home from school and found his mother dead. And his father made him to continue to go to school. He was getting no counseling. He told them, I don't want to talk about it, so no one told me. And when I found out, I was like, that was pretty vital information I needed to know to help him along this way. No 14-year-old's equipped, no adult's equipped to go through that, much less a 14-year-old alone. And so I'm so grateful to what you're doing. I think it's going to be a huge improvement in our school system because it's going to give the teacher and the school the tools we need to walk with that child through this time. So thank you.
We have time for about 2 more questions, and then we'll wrap the panel part up. Over here.
Hi, everybody. My name is Morgan. My question is to Chief Brito and to Delegate Wilson. You guys would probably have the most insight into this. Without going into too much detail, a couple years ago, I ended up on the wrong side of the law. And I have seen the inside of the Maryland prison system. And we tell ourselves that the prison system is for rehabilitation. But for myself, I have seen enormous government waste and a lot of dignity and respect being taken away from people and a lot of ineffective and underfunded treatment. So on the surface of it, to me, someone who has a bias obviously against it, it seems like a system that has no intention of changing. And obviously this is not anything directed at either of you, but how do we go about changing a system and working within a system that doesn't seem to want to change and doesn't seem to want to work with us?
Let me take that one because actually from when I first got elected in 2014, 2015, we started the Justice Reinvestment Initiative. The Justice Reinvestment Initiative was guided. We all bought in. The governor bought in. The first year was a task force where we brought in the Pew Research Foundation. They had done this in a number of other states to completely do an overhaul review of the criminal justice systems, particularly on incarceration, to determine where the waste is, where the effective programs are, what else needs to be added, and to try to basically work on a 2-tier system. Incarceration is part rehabilitative, it's part punitive. But you don't punish people just because they receive a sentence. You look at what the crime was that was committed. You try to track people out, those who are certainly nonviolent offenders. We should be putting on a different track than those who perhaps committed a heinous crime, a violent crime that really injured people. And the Justice Reinvestment System, the first year went through, it came up with recommendations. I was appointed to the work group that tried to put it together into one bill. It ended up being a 126-page bill. It covers everything from pretrial to potential sentences, but the big part is on after a sentence has been rendered. The goal is to use the same amount of money that we're currently using on prisons, but to reduce the population through taking people out of the system who don't need to be there, putting them into the rehabilitative and therapeutic programs that they need to become productive citizens. but keeping the funding level the same, so as those populations go down, take that money and reinvest it into even better therapeutic programs, rehabilitative programs, job training programs, re-entry programs. Bill Gertner's here from Gatekeepers. I don't know where he is right now, I can't see him, but I can tell you, I've worked with him. He was one of the first ones that contacted me when I was in the campaigning. We have worked together, and he serves on the Justice Reinvestment Board. We are finding ways to smartly treat our criminal justice system on that tail end so that we can do exactly what you saw, get rid of that waste, and instead reinvest it in programs that puts better people. This is why it ties into ACE, and I mentioned it in opening comments, because we know that one thing, if you can't prevent the initial adversity in the child's life, we know it's there after it's happened. What can we do to prevent a reoccurrence? Justice reinvestment is largely targeted at targeting that reoccurrence and trying to stop it before it happens so that we can get a person who is now productive, who better understands what his or her role is in a family structure, better understands what his or her role is in the community. We use mediation to get people through the reentry process so when they come out, they have that support group also so that they can succeed. Our whole goal is to get people through to succeed. I appreciate you are absolutely right. Absolutely right. I just want you to know that we have initiated that process. The bulk of that act, even though it was passed 2 years ago, goes into effect October 1st of this year. Because there's so much change in parole and probation, change in social services, change in agencies across the state, we had to give an additional year. Because if you roll it out too fast, guess what happens? It fails, it becomes the butt of jokes, it becomes the headlines for all the wrong reasons, and we want this to succeed so that people succeed. So thank you very much. You're absolutely right, and we are working on it.
Thank you.
My name is Ray Valenzuela. I'm the pastor at the Hagerstown Seventh Adventist Church just across the street. And, a couple of weeks ago, we had the Woodbridge apartment fires. And so I came in contact with our community in an emergency kind of way. I was on my way there because I had some members there, and I got a call from the Red Cross. Can you open it up so we can, your church is a good location for us to make it the center. And it was a blessing for me because, I was able to contact with the Red Cross, police, fire chief, and so we were having a block party in a couple of days where we gave away 125 back to school backpacks. We gave free haircuts to kids in the community. And so it made me aware, and this is a question I have for you guys more, how much more as a minister, as a pastor, I should be or can be involved in our community, whether it's law enforcement, schools. And it's a question for anybody here that likes to say, how much more can we give or be involved as a pastor, as a religious community to, as somebody said, it takes a community, and we want to be part of this community that helps in the process of healing communities.
Let me kind of address that. How much more can you be involved? It's limitless. How much you want to. Now, the situation you talk about, the fire, that was in the county, that wasn't in the city. Hagerstown Fire Department responded and had major control over that. And I recognize some of the good things that came out of it with all the faith-based communities that we have. In the city of Hagerstown, it's incredible, the faith-based communities that we have. And their collaboration and their compassion that they have, not only for the community, but working together to solve issues. But it's limitless. Don't ever set yourself to that, you're at one level. Whatever you want to do, whatever your heart will take you, that's where you need to go. That's what's important. It's limitless for us. I would never set any constraints on what you can and cannot do. That's not something that's going to be productive for us. But I kind of want to touch on a couple things, and I didn't have an opportunity to respond to your question about credibility. Credibility is incredibly important in law enforcement. How we comport ourselves, how we communicate, and those type of things. Education, you touched on that also. Education is very important. My father used to tell me that, my degrees and a quarter get me a cup of coffee. It's how you use those things. That's very important. This setting here is very good, but it's not ultimately intimate for really good conversations and things to happen. It's nice. I do these things. I like to talk. I could talk all day to you on a variety of different topics. But it's not that intimate. Now, I want to just tell you something that we're doing in the Hagerstown Police Department that's a little bit different than most. With Tim Morrow, the principal of Antietam Academy, in conjunction with the police department and the mediation center in Washington County, we do something that's called dialogue circles, which are intimate and extremely intimate. And those dialogue circles involve usually anywhere between 3 to 5 police officers and 3 to 5 young people in our community that sometimes have been adversely affected. It's a whole day event that we do, and it's having that conversation that's mediated what isn't germane to both of us and getting us to understand. At the beginning, you'll see a lot of standoffishness, with people. By the end of the day, there is a collaboration, there's a compassion, there's an understanding for one another. But those intimate conversations in dialogue circles, which we will have every member of the police department that will participate in, are incredibly important for us. Those communications. Love all you folks in here, but this is not that intimate. But when you have those face-to-face interactions, that's when really the rubber hits the road, and that's when we get things done, and that's where we understand one another. Because police officers are much more than a uniform, and members in our community are much more than people in our communities. So understanding those things is really germane to the bedrock principle of getting things done and addressing challenges we have in our community.
Thank you. And specific to your question, I would encourage you to connect with the Hagerstown Area Religious Council. We work with a network of churches in the Bester neighborhood, and even though you're not directly in that neighborhood, there are other efforts that certainly are relevant to the community where your house of faith is located. Got about 2 or 3 minutes. Just any last thoughts or things that you'd like to share before we wrap up?
Also, I'd like to add that I know most of us may be professionals working in some area trying to make people's lives better. Even as a person out helping the community, we can help the agencies that are trying to do things better. I know that the short time that I've known the chief, Hagerstown Police Department came under their accreditation review or whatever, and it was good that people from the community came and shared their experiences. Positive experiences that they have with the agency. So even though, we're out helping others, give them a chance to help us. Somebody may want to write that letter of appreciation or whatever, to share those experiences. So they become a stakeholder in our success as well. So look for those chances and opportunities too, especially like the pastor having parishioners or congregation members that are doing things. It's a two-way street. We can scratch each other's backs. It's not always about funding, though it does help.
Anything else? Anybody have anything?
Can I do my infomercial thing?
Go ahead.
Okay. So for the past, 14 years, I've taken children out to national parks for a week-long adventure. We've done Grand Canyon, Yellowstone. I've taken 2 groups from Western Heights to Yellowstone, and this year we want to go to Acadia. I take 10 children with my teaching partner, and it's a life-transforming experience for these kids. And we're starting to gear up now to go in June, and I had some children come to me and say, Mrs. Holcomb, I want to go, but I can't even go to my parents and ask for this kind of money. It's an all-inclusive trip, and it costs $2,000 a kid. So I'm looking for church sponsors, business sponsors, anybody that wants to sponsor a child to have this life-transforming experience. So please see me if you think your organization is interested in that, because we really need community help.
And you will contact Carolyn Holcomb at Western Heights Middle School. What's the phone number? They can find you, right?
Yes.
All right, well, let's give a huge round of applause to our panel. Understand that these are people that took time out of their work. Carolyn went to school this morning, checked in her class, and then ran over here. So while they were doing something else, Brother Andy's over at Head Start. Obviously, Chief of Police. These are people that have other things to do, and they took the time to be here to share their perspective and have conversations. And so we sincerely appreciate that. So thanks again for taking the time. And also, Dr. Robert Anda flew from Georgia to be here. Let's give him a huge round of applause for his time. specific to the chief's point about a more intimate conversation, we plan from this point to have more specific conversations with Dr. Anda's organization and ACE Interface to talk about if there is a select group of people in this community where we're doing work and then in the very surrounding neighborhoods and thinking about what's the actual term that is used, your master practitioner program.
Trainers.
Master trainers.
Yeah.
People that can continue to promote the work, but also be able to provide information and continue to cause that ripple effect in the community. So we're getting ready to move to our next speaker, but just one more round of applause for all of our folks. Thank you.